Hey everybody, Ben here with Midwest Climate Engineering Watch, and sorry it took so long to create a new video. A buddy of mine passed away, was a policeman on the St. Louis City Police Department and got shot in the head and killed, and we had to do what we had to do to take care of him and his family and give him a proper funeral and pay a proper tribute. So let's move on, let's get into the other portion of this. Last time we discussed propaganda and how it's being used and the psychology behind it, such as your Besmanov techniques to subverting a country, to projects like Operation Mockingbird, and so on and so forth. Today we're going to look into why these programs are needed and how they play in a role. And one of the key factors is economic destruction. First and foremost, economic destruction cannot be helped, unless there is environmental destruction that's paving the way. And today, we are going to discuss at the level of economic destruction we truly are in. So, everybody right now in mainstream media is saying and shouting out loud that COVID caused the current demise in our economy. Well, that is absolutely untrue. It accelerated the demise, but it is not necessarily what caused it. The reality of it is, since we had the formation of the Federal Reserve and the demise of our currency, our impending explosion was on its way. And here's some evidence and proof behind it. On February 5th, the MIT research sector stated there's a 70% chance of recession in the next 6 months. Okay, this was on February 5th, way before COVID landed on shores here. Here's a summary of that article. Looking at data back in 1916, the researchers said that the index was a reliable recession indicator since it rose leading up to every prior recession. They found that when index topped 70%, the likelihood of a recession in the next 6 months rose to 70%. As of November 2019, the reading on the index was 76%. So in that indicator alone, the research showed that one way or another we're going to head towards economic collapse. The recession is a nice sprinkled way of saying it will recover, but realistically it won't. Our environment provides 70% of global GDP for free, and as we continue to destroy and tank it, our GDP has dropped, at a level that we can't recover from. So, what else is this? I'd urge you to look up the fact that the Federal Reserve did quantitative easing back in October for about 30 days straight. Quantitative easing is a method used to pump money into the stock market to keep it inflated as time goes on, which is a very, very bad sign. They did that in the 08 crisis. Alright, moving on. Next article is, are we headed into a recession or depression, and what's the difference? In the recent weeks, some prominent economists have pondered the idea of the current economic shock brought on by shutting down as much of America's economy could trigger not just a recession, but a larger, deeper, and more damaging event. Even as the U.S. tiptoes towards recovery, with more states reopening and businesses resuming operations, the prospects of an economic collapse along with the lines of the Great Depression can't be entirely ruled out, experts say. The economy has passed the apex of shock, said Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, as Memorial Day holiday nears and business and consumer activity are reestablished. He said the economy can expect to regain some momentum, albeit at slower rate than COVID. But Zandi added one significant worrisome caveat. If there's a serious second wave as business reopen, which is a clear risk, then we're going back in a recession, and then this period will go down as a depression. I think most likely the scenario is that we avoid depression. But the risks are awfully high. Let's be honest, folks. We are headed straight. We have been in a depression, and the numbers are just stacked to make it appear that we're not. No matter what the stock market says, the unemployment rate is much higher than what is reported. Job losses continue to be mounting, and more is continuing to go down. You can see in the economic statistics, when you look at suicide rates, when you look at mental health episodes, when you look at poverty rates, when you look at homeless rates, it all continues to climb, regardless of the fact that the stock market is doing really well. Moving on. Next article. The next global depression is coming, and optimism won't slow it down, by Time magazine. Here's a summary of the article. We're not talking about Hoovervilles today. The U.S. and most of the world have a sturdy middle class. That's a debatable. We have a social safety nets that didn't exist 9 decades ago. Fortunately, that's true even for developing countries. Most governments today accept the deep economic interdependence among nations created by the decades of trade and investment globalization. But those expecting a so-called V-shaped economy recovery, a scenario in which vaccine makers conquer COVID-19 and everybody goes straight back to work, or even a smooth and steady long-term bounce back like the one that followed the global financial crisis a decade ago, are going to be disappointed. Let's start with the word depression. There is no commonly accepted definition of that term. That's not surprising, given how rarely we experience catastrophes of this magnitude. But there are 3 factors that separate a true economic depression from a mere recession. First, the impact is global. Second, it cuts deeper into the livelihoods than any recession we face in our lifetimes. Third, its bad effects will linger longer. A depression is not a period of uninterrupted economic contraction. That can be periods of temporary progress within it that create appearance of recovery. The Great Depression in the 1950s began with the stock market crash of October 1929 and continued in the early 40s, when World War II created the basis of new growth. That period included 2 separate economic drops, first from 1929 to 1933, and then again from May 1957 into 1958 as in the 1930s. We're likely to see moments of expansion in this period of depression. Depressions don't generate ugly stats and send buyers and sellers into hibernation. They change the way we live. The Great Recession created every little lasting change. Well, if that isn't true, and this idea that we're going to recover from this is a big lie. We're not going to recover from this. There just isn't a way. This idea that media and the presidential candidates keep pumping out that this is all just going to get better over time and we're going to fight out of it, it's not possible. It just won't happen. It just won't happen. Moving on. Next article. It is Great Depression. Great Depression comparisons are depressing, but this time is hold on. Did I read this right? Great Depression comparisons are depressing, but this time it is different. So, you have some feel-good articles that go in to say that we can recover from this and that it's all going to work out because we have more resources available. Ultimately and realistically, our resources are based upon our fiat currency. And when our fiat currency dries out, whenever our world reserve dollar goes out of the world reserve currency spot, we will decline heavily. How long do you think we could survive having all of our military survive around the world, having all these bases surrounding other countries, paying for all that, giving never-ending foreign aid to many countries across the world, but yet we don't take care of our own infrastructure here? This house of cards we call the U.S. economy is not coming back. It is heading for absolute fire. Next up, a second Great Depression. Unemployment crisis hits big cities hard. There's some bullet points. The unemployment rate in New York rose to 20.4% in June, even as the broader country has improved. Los Angeles has a 19.5% jobless rate. The unemployment rate is a measure of financial hardship for American families. There is no official definition of economic depression. An unemployment rate near or above 20% is a good indicator, according to some economists. Now, funny. They don't ever have an official definition for a depression. That's because they don't want it to be defined. They can make it as bad as possible of a situation and continue to make it seem like it'll be recovered and it'll be fine. These pacifying words and these pacifying definitions lead you to believe that everything will be returned to normal, but it won't. It absolutely won't. Cities across the country, granted, the more Democratic-led cities are the ones collapsing first due to the exaggerated response to the COVID-19 reaction, is causing a rapid decline. But really, whose fault is it? It's not the politicians. It isn't. It's the voters' fault. They sit back and allow this thing to happen, and here we are today with poor leadership and poor call judgment calls. And finally, in the last article, the second Great Depression. Article states, what will the recovery look like? At this fraught moment, nobody knows enough about the consumer sentiment and government ordinances and business failures and stimulus packages and the spread of disease to make solid predictions about the future. The Trump administration and some bullish financial forecasters arguing that we will end up with a strong V-shaped rebound with economic activity surging right back to where it was in no time. Others are betting on a longer, slower U-shaped runaround with the pain extending for year 3. Still, others are sketching out of a kind of a flaccid checkmark. It's a long tail sagging torpid into the future. Excitement about the reopening aside, that third and most miserable course is the one we appear to be on. The country will rebound as things open. This bounce will seem remarkable given how big the drop was. Retail sales rose in 18% in May. The economy added 2.5 million jobs, but absent dramatic policy action, into pandemic depression is possible. The Congressional Budget Office anticipated that the American economy will generate $8 trillion less in economic activity over the next decade than it's predicted in just a few months ago. That a full recovery might not take hold until the 2030s. So what's the gist of what this article says? Realistically, we're not going to come back in a meaningful time frame. What I've said time and time again throughout this video. This idea that whoever is in office is going to fix the economy is not true. If they truly wanted to fix this economy, if they truly wanted to preserve it when COVID hit, here's what they should have done. First and foremost, that CARES Act wouldn't have gone into corporations. Notice they spent $5 to $6 trillion on the corporations, and yet they still laid people off and they still consolidated, regardless of regardless of the money they received. That money was supposed to help bail out and provide paychecks for the people that were sidelined, but that didn't work, did it now? The American public majority, I can't even say majority anymore because numbers are getting higher and higher. I'm going to say half or less than half received a $1,200 stimulus check while the others received nothing at all. It was infinitely easier to give the corporations a $5 to $6 trillion $5 to $6 trillion bailout than it was to give us a $1,200 check. And that check, that is not for us at all. That was, it's about stripping and taking away what we have, especially mainstream business America, the mom and pop shops, letting them go out of business and letting corporations buying them at wholesale prices with the vast amounts of bailout money they received. Another thing they could have done is provided everybody with a temporary UBI program of $2,000 a month. Now, I know some are saying, well, that's socialism. In a pandemic emergency where jobs are being laid off, the best thing to do is to give the people a statement. Instead of getting $5 to $6 trillion to the corporations, why not give it back to the people? Because at the end of the day, that money is ours, not the government's. So give it back. And finally, the last best thing they could have done is provide everybody Medicare for all. To be able to treat and cover the COVID crisis and any of the damages done without having to worry about medical bills. Those three simple things would have saved our economy enough. But along with that, it doesn't matter. Because if we can't treat the environment right, our economy is going to go down anyways. And everything that they're doing is consolidating and controlling everything for a more centralized government. The theme of all my episodes, I've been trying to outline the fact that as the environment explodes, the economy explodes, the only answer is centralized government. I hope we're starting to put the picture together. Don't worry, we'll drop many more videos as time goes forward. As always, this has been with Midwest Climate Engineering Watch, and always, always, always remember, choose dangerous freedom instead of peaceful slavery. Thank you.